Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the most mediocre makeup releases of 2019. But let's be honest, let's call it what it really is, and that's a roast. I'm just gonna roast some makeup releases from 2019. And I do have a video up of the most exciting releases of 2019, and I will link those down in the description box. So make sure you check that video out as well. And since there's been so many releases in 2019, I have quite a bit to talk about. I'm gonna scoot over because I would like to put some photos here for reference so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And just a quick disclaimer, these are releases that I personally thought they were mediocre. So some of these might have been really exciting for you, but just not for me personally. And that is okay. Everybody has different preferences, different styles, and just different opinions on what they like. And these are in no particular order, so let's get started. First, I have written down the Fenty eyeliners. And those were the like really colorful eyeliners. There was like a blue and a pink and a green and a white, I think. And everyone was so excited, including me. I was like, oh my god, I want them so bad. Maybe they're, better than the NYX ones, which the NYX eyeliners were super hyped, but they did crack. So I was hoping that these Fenty liners would be much better, but I'm glad I waited because the general consensus was that they were not great at all. They seemed really liquidy and they had to be built up, and because of that they cracked quite a bit. So a lot of people were disappointed. I heard a lot of people returning them. So I think that was such a failed release, unfortunately, because it could have been really, really good. The next release is from Lime Crime, and it was their Venus Vivid palette, I think it was called. It just came out of absolutely nowhere. No one had any idea that this was coming out. And there was definitely a lot of excitement, me included, but it had really bad reviews. People were really disappointed with it. It was just not up to par, and I think the word got around because I don't think that palette was selling, because Lime Crime put it on sale, and then they were even including the palettes for free with like I think it was like $45 purchase or something like that. So they were just like really trying to get rid of them. That's how bad they were, and that's how you know that a product is not selling enough and they're just trying to get rid of it. So that one was definitely really disappointing because I think the Lime Crime eyeshadow formula is really good. So that was such a bummer. And the next one I'm going to talk about was the ColourPop Brunch Date with Zoella collaboration. And I just felt like, why? I don't find the appeal in this at all. The colors are boring. The packaging is so like kitschy, and I just felt like this was so unnecessary. The next release is also a palette, and it's the Ofra Francesca Talat Infinity palette. Nobody talks about Ofra eyeshadows. I feel like the only times I really hear about Ofra is from people that are affiliated and get PR, and I just felt like this palette is so chunky and I don't like the colors. I just feel like there's a lot of thick white plastic, and I also feel like there's so much space between all the eyeshadows, and in general I just really don't like Ofra's packaging. They have some really weird like mixture of smaller circles and bigger circles in like a thick white palette. I just don't like it. The colors in this palette also don't speak to me, and I just feel like I didn't really see many people talking about it, so not a fan. The next release are two palettes from Makeup Geek, and they're these two like romantic looking kind of neutral soft glam palettes. And when I first saw these, I had no idea they were Makeup Geek. I thought this was like Claire's makeup. They look so cheap, and even just the way the eyeshadows looked in the pen, I felt like they looked so like powdery and cheap, and this whole thing was just so ugly. And again, I felt like the only people talking about these that were excited about them were the ones getting PR and were affiliated with Makeup Geek. I feel like Makeup Geek has been really trying to just claw their way back up into the beauty community as like a brand that people want and talk about, and I just feel like it's not really working. I know they're supposed to be doing like a rebrand this year, and I just feel like it's too late. It's way too late, and they're really hyping it up too, which throws me off personally. And I partially feel like this release was pretty random, and I think it's because they're in between rebranding, so it's kind of like we don't want to put out our new look yet, but we don't want to necessarily do the same look we did for the last, like, I don't know how long Makeup Geek has existed, but I don't know, a couple, like at least the last 5 years. So I get that, but it just looked so cheap, so it was definitely not the way to go for them. Ever since then, I honestly haven't really heard anything about Makeup Geek and any other releases. They've been having a ton of sales because they're trying to get rid of stock with the old packaging. And I know I don't feel tempted to buy anything from them. And I definitely hopped on the hype in the beginning when they really were flourishing a couple years ago, and I bought a bunch of singles. And yeah, they were nice and they were cheap, but I feel like ColourPop has pretty much replaced that hole in my life that I want $5 eyeshadow pans, and I just feel like ColourPop does such a better job with creating exciting releases and a variety. And yeah, I'm really curious to see what Makeup Geek comes out with in 2020. Enough of that rant. The next one is Lady Gaga and how she came out with her new brand that only launched on Amazon. I feel like everyone was super excited to hear that Lady Gaga was coming out with her brand, and I feel like everyone had a certain vision in mind for what kind of product she would release. And in general, I think everyone had the same idea. And then when they actually showed the photos of all the products, I think a lot of people were like, what is this? This doesn't look like Lady Gaga. This doesn't look like what we all imagine Lady Gaga to be like as like a person, as a artist. And it was just really shocking and kind of boring. The packaging is pretty nice, but I was not tempted at all to buy any of this stuff. Honestly, I just felt like it was pretty average, and I just partially felt like it was a money grab. I think just any celebrity at this point that is not been known for makeup coming out with makeup, to me is just like you're trying to cash in on that beauty industry money that has blown up over the last 5+ years. The next release is actually a bunch of releases over the course of the year, and it's the BH Zodiac palettes. I feel like we're all pretty much on the same page on our thoughts on this because I haven't seen really many people excited about them. They just really messed up. They're so bad. They're so boring. They really did all these zodiac signs so wrong. I don't know what else to say. They're horrible, and I can't believe that somebody actually looked at these palettes and was like, yes, done, send it, ship it, we're selling these, because I would never. So I'm actually really curious on how their sales are going with those palettes. I bet they're gonna end up in TJ Maxx for $5 at some point. This next release is from Morphe, and it's the, I don't know, some kind of 39 letter or some palette, and it's the one that's like reds and browns and a pop of green, literally one pop of green. And this palette's just so sad, and people are so excited, and Morphe just has such a stan cult, honestly, that they could make an all green palette with a pop of red and people would be so thrilled about it. I think a lot of people laughed at this, but a lot of people liked it, and I personally felt like this was such a mediocre release. I wouldn't want this even if it was for free. Like, no thank you. And for this next release, I know a lot of people really loved it. Some people didn't, but the people that really loved it, like really loved it because of the people that were involved. And I just want to say, if you disagree with me and if you don't think this was a mediocre release and this was your favorite palette of all time and this was your perfect palette, then that's fine, but you're not going to change my mind on this. Like, that's your preference, this is my preference. So don't bother if you want to come into my comments just in case I get any Jeffree Star stands. So this is the Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson launch that they did with the Conspiracy and Controversy palettes and some lipsticks and other products. I felt like there was so much hype around this because of the show, and it was really great marketing. Like, let's be honest, they did a really good job with marketing it, hyping it up, doing all these episodes of like behind the scenes, and you got a feeling of what it was like behind the scenes, but there was a lot behind the scenes that you didn't see. It was definitely quite refined to really show you what they wanted you to see, but they were good at making you feel like you were included in something really cool, and you got to, see the process of Shane picking out the shades and all of that. But when I first saw the palette, the main one, the Conspiracy, and I said this on my Instagram stories, you could really tell that all these shades were chosen based on sentimental reasons and sentimental names and what they meant to the person who created this palette rather than a cohesive color story. And I understand Shane's reasoning on the whole top row being neutral and then having some of the pops of colors, but I just felt like this was so lackluster, and I'm honestly kind of surprised that Jeffree Star was like, yes, you're done and we can sell this, because I would think he wanted to refine it just a little bit color-wise, but he probably knew that it was gonna sell no matter what. And even the mini conspiracy palette or controversy palette, I don't even know, they both started with a C. That palette was also so disappointing. I just couldn't really believe that that was the color story, if it even deserves to be called a color story. And also people had trouble with some of the shades. I know that some people were disappointed with the quality and some of the shimmers and mattes even, I think. So now onto a much less tension causing brand. This is the Nabla Tarot palette. The packaging was so good, it's so beautiful, and they really made it like really enticing with their little video, and it just, everyone was super pumped. And then they show the inside and I was like, that is not what I imagined that inside to be. And this happened a couple of times this year with the whole like outside not matching inside, and that's the next palette I'm going to talk about. But yes, so I was super bummed about this tarot palette because I felt like the inside was just lots of like super shimmery shades, which I usually like, but not in the color story that they had in the palette, not with those mattes. I was totally uninspired by it, and was hoping to finally try a Nabla palette, but I saved my money, which I'm glad. And then the same kind of theme, the Moonspell palette from Manny MUA. The outside is just stunning, and it was also kind of released, I think, around Halloween time. So I was expecting some really beautiful like jewel tone greens, purples, maybe some grungy colors too. And then when he showed the inside of the palette, I was like, no thank you. Just felt like it didn't match the theme of the outside of the palette, and the outside is so beautiful. It's really beautiful artwork and packaging. The palette just didn't speak to me at all. I felt like there was quite a bit of people pretty disappointed with the inside not matching the outside, and I feel like this was another release that the way that the outside looked, people kind of formed an idea of what the inside would look like, and a lot of people were disappointed, some weren't, but I was definitely more on the side of what happened to the inside of the palette because it was not what I was expecting. I have 2 more releases left. The next one is really anything from Kylie Cosmetics, Kylie Skin. I feel like everything's starting to be really wash, rinse, and repeat. The palettes have definitely some crossover shades between. I just think there's too many releases. The only release that I did like from hers is the You're So Money Baby or something like that. I felt like the color scheme on that one was really beautiful, but everything else, her holiday release, her Valentine's Day release, and any other collabs with her sisters are just the same shit, different day, and they're not inspiring, and I'm sure the formula is fine. I have been wanting to try some of her lip glosses, which I think are probably going to be the same formula as ColourPop. But you never know, maybe it's different. And I feel like if it wasn't Kylie's name on it, people wouldn't be as excited for it. Also, she released a skincare line, which I wouldn't let those products touch me with a 10-foot pole, personally. She has a walnut scrub, which like, come on, like she must not have had skincare experts helping her or something. Like, duh, you don't use that on your skin, use that on your body. But I did watch Caroline Herron's YouTube video about it, and she went through the ingredients, and the ingredients weren't necessarily bad, but she said she wouldn't really feel like it would have an effect long-term wise on some of the products, and just the price tag was also a bit much for what the products are. So I personally would trust a skincare brand with skincare items than a makeup brand from a celebrity that all of a sudden does skincare products, but that's just me. I also haven't really seen anyone talking about her products and how they're working out for them. And so the last launch is the Urban Decay Naked Reloaded palette, which basically is the ABH Sultry palette. It looks pretty much the same. It's basically a smoky palette with a pop of peach, and I just much prefer the Sultry palette. I just feel like the shimmers in there look, even just in the pan, like they're much more vibrant. And I feel like the Urban Decay palette just looks like it's much duller. I don't know what it is. And it also bothers me that their pans are so skinny and tall, and I don't like that. Their palettes are also super heavy for no reason. So I just felt like this was such a copy of the ABH palette, and Urban Decay is trying to keep with their naked theme palettes, because I think that those other naked palettes have really like gone down the drain and they're not nearly as popular as they used to be. And I feel like they're trying to keep up with the trends, so they're trying to come out with other color stories under the sub-brand basically of Naked. And I just feel like it's time for Urban Decay to move on from that and start doing some other more creative and unique products and product packaging. And I think that would just really allow them to grow in 2020 and gain some more traction and interest from people, and you know, separate themselves from the competitors, because there's so many more beauty brands and so many more indie brands and just so many palettes and so many makeup releases constantly being pushed out since their original Naked palettes from like 5 or more years ago. So that's it. Those are the most mediocre makeup releases of 2019 in my opinion. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what the most mediocre makeup releases were in 2019. So let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.